Well, good morning, class, and welcome to another week for our weekly lessons. And this week's going to look a little different. And what I decided to do is I'm actually just going to start to show you the actual lesson plan itself, and kind of run through each section, and maybe see how that works. And if you guys kind of like that, then we can continue to do that. So again, it's kind of a trial by error kind of basis, just kind of something, new to see instead of just slides. So again, this part is going to be proportional relationships part 1. So there will be a part 2 next week, but we're going to kind of just introduce the idea of these proportional relationships since this is a new unit, and hopefully some of you have been starting to get in there and finish the previous unit as well. So our learning target today is I can explain the proportional relationship between the two tables of information using the constant of proportionality. And that constant of proportionality, you've already sort of been doing as we worked with proportions a little bit in the previous unit. We just give it a different name. So that name is going to be that sort of, call it scale factor that we've been using. But in this case, with tables and with proportions, we call it constant of proportionality. So if I look at this first part, engage, right? So you're going to kind of look at this. What do you think? And I'm not going to give you an answer right now, and I want you to kind of think about it. What do you see in this table? Do you think it's proportional, or do you think it's non-proportional? And you can kind of use your knowledge of previous experiences with proportions, which you probably have had in previous math classes, but kind of looking at this table, excuse me, is it something that's proportional or it's non-proportional? And go ahead and stick your answer at the bottom. And maybe at the end of this lesson, you'll be able to kind of go back and maybe look at that and either solidify your understanding or maybe change your thinking a little bit. And again, that's the kind of the point of the engage part, is for you to think about something, and maybe if it was maybe not necessarily right by the end of this lesson, you can go back and be able to change your thinking on that. So again, this table, we have 0, 1, 1, 3, 2, 5, 3, 7. Are they proportion? And again, that relationship between X and Y, is there something there that shows a relationship with this table? So if we continue down and look at the explore section, there is a video that you can watch, and we're not going to watch it in this video, but there's a video that kind of looks at proportional relationships and that constant of proportionality. What is that? And it kind of helps you define it and be able to see it, how to solve it, and some different examples that way. So make sure you click on that video and kind of look at that resource as a way to, again, enhance your learning with this idea of proportional relationships. With the read section, I kind of opened it up for us to kind of look at. And if you look at this, there's a couple key terms I kind of want to point out. The first one is a constant. A constant is a number that does not change. So when we talk about the constant of proportionality, it's a number that's applied to every relationship in that table that does not change, all right? So kind of like scale factor, it has to be the same the whole way down the table. If it's not, then we say that's not a proportional relationship. And here you can see that it produces a straight line on a graph, which is something that we will get into next week in part 2. But here's an example of the constant rate of change, or we call it the proportional relationship. So this y equals 40x. When we look at y and x, we always think of y is the output. That's what we're going to get, and x is the input. So whatever we put in for x, y is going to give us a certain number. So if we apply this to this equation, what we're saying is that 40 is the constant of proportionality, right? It's that constant number that does not change. And if it's applied to every relationship in that table, then we can say that this table has a proportional relationship. So if my input is 2, right, 2 times 40 is 80. So that one works. If I input 4 for x, 40 times 4 is 160. And if I keep going down the line, they all work. So the constant of proportionality of 40, all right, is that constant number applied to every relationship in the table, all right, making this what we call a proportional relationship. So if I were to kind of maybe draw a little bit, what we're doing is we're actually, we're multiplying by 40 the whole way down this table, right? So y equals 40x means y equals 40 times x. Every time I multiply the constant by the x factor, I should get the y factor here, but it should be able to apply to every part of that table. So not necessarily are we looking for a missing number, but we're looking to see, is this table showing a relationship? And in this case, it is. So y equals 40x is a proportional relationship. It is correct. So if we kind of go practice, so if we go back to our document and click the practice problems, you will be kind of practicing this idea. So if we take this first idea here and we say, which table has the constant of proportionality between y and x of 1/4? So what table here, when we input the x, we get a y answer of the right side. So if I were to look at this example and say, okay, you know, my equation could be y equals 1/4 x, right? So if I look at these tables, if I put the x values in for x and multiply that by 1/4, am I getting the same y answers? Is which table reflects the constant proportionality between y and x? And this is kind of what you're going to do with these practice problems, and kind of solidify your understanding of the importance of this constant of proportionality and how it does show, right, proportional relationships. So again, we're not necessarily finding missing numbers, which we could. Once we know the constant proportionality, we can. But you in this lesson are, again, going back to that learning target. I can explain the proportional relationship between two tables. What do I see? Is it a proportional relationship? If it is, why? And again, the constant can tell us why. So after you explore through those more resources, I have some things here at the end, and we showed these before. Is in the explain, we have a Padlet again. An example in that Padlet is you identifying, kind of practicing what you explored in a situation. Is that a proportion? And if it is, why? Or if it's not, why not? And in the evaluate section, I'm going to simply just have you complete the introducing proportional relationships power focus area. All right, so kind of getting after that, make sure you're in the resources, take the diagnostic, and kind of get in those resources and attempt that power focus area. In the elaborate section, we're going to use a Flipgrid, and what we're going to have you do is find a recipe in your house. And I'm going to have an example by this evening of putting my recipe, because I have a favorite recipe, and I'm going to actually do my own video for you guys as an example and kind of see if you can find a proportional relationship between your recipe. So maybe you wanted to double your recipe because your family's coming over, or maybe you wanted to reduce your recipe because it's only you and not, you know, a recipe for 4 people. But again, the idea of proportional relationships in the constant is involved with something as simple as a recipe. And then the express section, the question, in what ways have you gotten better in this kind of work? So kind of reflecting through that lesson. So going back to that engage part, thinking of proportion and non-proportional. From your understanding, hopefully by the end of this lesson, you can go back to this engage part and maybe change your thinking or enhance your thinking and be confident in saying that I can explain the idea of a proportional relationship. Hopefully you like this video. And again, we're going to kind of try this a little bit over the next couple of weeks in running through this lesson. Please make sure you're working through this next unit. Finish the unit that you're on if you're still working in the first one, and then we'll kind of get in this unit and get started. Make sure you're setting goals. Make sure you're doing the correct things that we do normally each week. And if you have any questions, please make sure you reach out. Thank you.